Kitayama, Kyoto, is known for producing beautiful fine wood. Cultivation of Kitayama cedar has flourished as one of Kyoto's industries since the Muromachi period, 1333 to 1573. Over this long history, the species has been repeatedly improved, and cultivation techniques have been accumulated. Haruo Nagasawa was born in 1932 as the third generation of a family that operates a forestry business in Kitayama. Kitayama cedar is fine wood crafted by human hands for posts, beams, and rafters in Sukiya-style architecture. Have you ever wondered about Kitayama and Kyoto, and how cedar is grown? The term Kitayama cedar refers to several kinds of trees. Various expressions can be created in the cedar, depending on its kind and how it was grown. Kitayama craftsmen are the ones that produce those expressions. Mr. Nagasawa's production of Kitayama cedar involves many processes, including selecting mother trees, creating saplings, and so on. Most Kitayama cedar are not grown from seeds, but by collecting cuttings from mother trees that have been improved over many years and growing saplings from the scions.
挿し木で植えたら化けへんじゃね。その種をまいて、その種をまいたら、その親以上のものは20万分の1しか出えへんねと。あと悪くなるらしいわ。挿し木はクローンやから、親と同じものができるわけない。成長は種の方が早い。そやから今現在の北山も種毛の中からええやつをよって挿し木しとるわけ。
Creating saplings is the planting of cuttings in fields. First, red clay is collected to make mud, to apply to the base of the cuttings. If the soil contains bacteria, it could damage the roots of the sapling. Dirt is taken from where there is no growing moss or bacteria, and it is mixed with water to create mud, with the consistency of tempura batter. In the past, the red clay was formed into balls, which were attached to the base of the cuttings and planted. But Mr. Nagasawa noticed that the rooting rate was higher when the mud was applied, and the cutting was planted. In Kitayama, most saplings are created using the mud method. The mud is applied all over the base, without any gaps. The saplings are grown in nurseries for about 2 years. Mr. Nagasawa creates about 2,000 saplings per year, but after planting in the mountains and thinning, only about 800 remain. Kitayama has poor soil, but it is said that conversely, this poor soil is what produces such tight, lustrous wood. The cultivated saplings are planted in the mountain. This is the transplanting process. The soil around the roots is washed off, and the sapling is planted directly in the mountain. At this time, the sapling is planted so that the side with growing branches is toward the mountain. The direction in which branches grow is the same as the direction in which roots grow, so planting with that side toward the mountain will make the tree stable and let it grow into a cedar that is straight from the roots up. Support stakes are placed on the side, opposite the slope, toward the valley. In snowy Kitayama, having the stake attached below the tree makes it more difficult for young trees to be washed away by the weight of snow. Two months after planting, undergrowth mowing is performed 3 or 4 times per year until early autumn when temperatures drop. On steep slopes where it is difficult to use a mower, the grass is cut by hand, using a mowing sickle. The cut grass will become fertilizer for the cedars. In the 7th year, when the trees have reached a height of about 2 meters, lopping off the lower branches is performed. The lower branches are then lopped off successively every few years thereafter. The uniform diameter of Kitayama cedar, which is used as fine wood for tokobashira floor posts, etc., from base to tip is considered good.
上が細くて下が極端にほっといたら太いねば。で下を打っといたると締めてきよるさが太らへん。枝を打っとくと上も元木も同じぐらいのきれいにザーンと埋まるわけ。
The main tools for lopping off branches are the sickle and machete. The sickle can cut thin branches, but thick branches are more easily cut with the machete. The tools that Mr. Nagasawa takes when he goes to the mountains are a saw for cutting trees, a sickle and machete for pruning branches, and a whetstone that can be hung on his waist. How these tools are used depends on the growth of the tree and the season, so he has several kinds even for the same tool. The blade of the machete is thick, with good striking force, to be able to prune even thick branches. The blade of the branch lopping machete is grooved. This is done to make the blade thinner, and to make sharpening faster, by reducing the blade area in contact with the whetstone. Mr. Nagasawa mainly uses the sickle. The sickle has a thin, sharp blade, and the curved blade is used for cutting off and clearing branches. These are the scars from cutting branches at the same time. The scar from cutting with a machete is depressed, and will take about 7 years to disappear. But the scar from cutting with a sickle is small and protruding and will disappear in about 3 years. It is also advantageous in terms of price if the scars disappear quickly, and it can be shipped with an appropriate diameter. However, for thick branches, the striking force of the machete is needed. The sharper the cutting tool, the more beautifully the product can be finished. Even at the mountain, care of tools is essential. So, he takes along a natural whetstone produced locally in Kyoto when he goes into the mountains. Plus, he selects the tool according to the type of tree and the season and readjusts it.
春は木が柔らかいやろ。水分上げてるから。水分があって柔らかい木はノコギリを詰めようとしようんやわ。春先から秋の彼岸までに木にやったらやや角度をこう薄するようにヤスリをつけんなんし、それから冬になってきたらやや90度に近い75度ぐらいの角度でヤスリ入れていかなんし。
The tools are made according to the hand and the tree. Kitayama cedar with its uniform diameter, from repeated branch lopping. The Eda-jime process is performed the year before felling the tree. This is the process of cutting off all branches except the top, and is a method unique to Kitayama cedar. Cutting off the branches suppresses water absorption, and increases the density of the tree's surface, which improves color and luster and prevents cracks from forming. After climbing up to the top of a tree once, he goes from tree to tree, and Mr. Nagasawa said that in the old days, he'd climb up in the morning and wouldn't come down until lunch. Honjikomi process. This is performed between the 30th and 35th year after planting. Mr. Nagasawa goes into the mountains accompanied by his apprentice, who is in his 3rd year of training. The direction where the tree will fall is determined and a rope is attached. The machete is used to create a leading notch on the falling side. And then, the following cut is created with the saw. At this time, the tree isn't completely felled, and is left attached slightly to the trunk. In Honjikomi, the tree which will be felled is leaned against a nearby tree, and secured with rope so that it won't be tipped over by wind, etc., and then the bark is stripped off. The tree is tilted, so that it is exposed to the sun as much as possible so that it will dry easily. The shape, formed by tying the tops together, looks like the tip of a spear, so it's called spear assembly. From long ago, the young workers climb the trees and the master controls the rope and gives instructions. With the tree that becomes the core at the center, several trees are bunched together and secured with ropes. After the trees have been tied together, comes the stripping of bark. The tool used for peeling the bark from the tree is a spud. The spud is made using the hard, moisture-repelling branch of the cedar called reaction wood. The tool called tegi has been used since ancient times as a tool for climbing trees. As long as you have a rope, you can make a ladder using the wood growing in the mountains. Since Honjikomi leaves the trees stripped of bark standing in the mountains, it is a reasonable method that doesn't require drying equipment or a warehouse. Peeling the bark while the trees are still standing is called Tachi Muki. As the bark-peeled trees dry in the sunlight, the remaining moisture inside the tree is drawn up by the remaining branches at the top, so that the surface and inside dry evenly, making it less likely to split. Finally, so that they cannot absorb moisture, the remaining slight connection at the base is cut. Leaving it this way to dry naturally for a week to 10 days gives Kitayama cedar its characteristic color and luster. About a week after Tachi Muki, the second half of the Honjikomi process, felling the trees and moving them down the mountain, is performed. Preparations for moving the trees down the mountain are performed in advance. One traditional tool for transporting logs from the mountains is a sled-like transporter, called a Kinma, written in Japanese characters meaning wooden horse. First, pieces of wood called baigi, or skids, are laid across the route using thin timber and so on. The skids are lined up and pushed partly into the ground. Although it may seem that the skids are lined up casually, they are laid differently according to the slope angle. Friction is calculated, and the smooth surfaces are faced up, where the slope is steep, while the triangular edges face up on gentler slopes. The wire rope used to control the Kinma, sled, speed, and act as the brake is secured to a tree trunk or similar object, and the wire rope is laid out along the route. The kinma is laid on top of the wire. The kinma is secured with the wire to ensure it doesn't move during loading. Poles to secure the load logs are installed, and transportation preparations are complete. If the trees that underwent Tachi Muki are placed directly on the kinma, they will be damaged. Trees that have not had their bark removed are loaded as cushions, and the trees that underwent Tachi Muki are placed on top of them. On this day, Mr. Nagasawa's son, who runs a forestry business, also joined in to create a three-man team. The trees that are used as cushions will also have their bark removed after reaching the bottom of the mountain and be made into products. The trees which underwent Tachi Muki are felled. A rope is hung from the tree which was the core of the spear assembly, and a long rope is passed through the hook at the end, and tied to the tree which will be felled. While still in the spear assembly, kubiyatashi of the tree, or cutting off the tree's top, is done. Using the rope, the tree is lowered slowly and carefully to the ground to avoid damaging it. When it becomes difficult to insert the saw, the tops that were cut off in kubiyatashi are cut loose and dropped so work can continue. Mr. Nagasawa and his son watch over the apprentice, who is making his first attempt at Honjikomi. When the last tree is felled, the high location work is done. The trees with their bark which were previously felled to act as cushions are loaded onto the kinma. Next, the trees that underwent Tachi Muki are loaded. A lot of time and effort went into growing these trees. They are loaded carefully to avoid damage. While considering the weight balance of the load, rope and wood from the mountains are used to make the bundle secure, so it won't come apart. The wire is wrapped around the load logs. On level areas, grease is applied to the skids for easy sliding. The speed is controlled by adjusting the friction between the wire and the logs. It's wrapped around.
手のこのつかみ方、これを力入れないとふわっと持ってったらスピード出るし、キュッとこう締めたったらゆっくりいくし、それでもまだ荷重がかかってくる場合はもう一つ巻いてクッと止めれば何歩でも止まるし、1日に5キロから6キロぐらい上行って荷積んで降りてきて、で途中まで上がっとくにはそうせんとあくる日一回できひんから。大概木間引きの場合は山の小屋の で寝泊まりしていうハンバーグ暮らしやね。
Because Kinma pulling is considered work that is dangerous and requires experience, it is rarely done these days. And caterpillar-type transporters, which are small and easy to maneuver, are used for transporting logs. The logs that were brought down from the mountain are immediately cut into 3-meter lengths for use as sukiya-style materials. A measuring rod is used, and the log is marked and cut. The original base is chopped off, so that it does not absorb water while standing, and also to make it easy to rotate while standing. The logs, which were used as cushions and brought down with their bark attached, are now stripped of their bark and made into a product. A spud is used, and as much as possible, the bark is stripped off in one sheet. The cedar bark, which was skillfully stripped off, was used in the past as the base for roofs. These days, stripping off the bark is usually performed using water pressure. Although this can greatly reduce labor and time, the trees that underwent Tachi Muki are said to have better color and luster. The work of removing small bits of bark remaining on the log surface is called Komuki, and is performed using a corsage sickle in which the blade of the sickle is wrapped with cloth. In Suwaria, a split is made in advance to prevent the log from splitting. A circular saw is used to create the split, while slightly adjusting the depth of the back cut according to the log diameter. The partner is his wife, and they must work as if breathing together or it won't be done well. A wedge called an arrow is driven into the back cut to prevent it from closing. Wedges are used to open the back cut wider, and the arrow is driven in. The arrow will fall out of the back cut naturally when it's dry, indicating sufficient drying. A traditional process in Kitayama is sand polishing. There is an order, and this is the final process before shipping. The sand is Kitayama's unique sand, and is called Bodai sand, because it is collected around Bodai Falls. The sand was washed out of the mountains upstream by a landslide about 200 years ago, and now that the landslide has stopped, it is collected by going into the mountains upstream of the falls. Any pebbles, etc., are removed from the sand which was brought back, and it is washed repeatedly like washing rice, until the water is clear. Bodai sand is fine sand, and as polishing is performed, the particles become even finer so that they can make the wood surface even more lustrous. It is said that well-grown Kitayama cedar is white and lustrous at first, changes to an amber color as time passes. And as even more years pass, a luster and texture as if painted with lacquer is produced. The ancestors of the people in Kitayama took advantage of the poor soil to create beautiful forests. Modern craftsmen use their wisdom and skills while preserving tradition to create wood that is even more beautiful. While machinery such as chainsaws have become mainstream, Mr. Nagasawa continues to insist on using hand tools that are gentle to wood. Today too, his only thought is taking care of his tools.